Welcome to Life Confessions TV. Try to relax and feel the story.
When I first walked through the gates of that house, I kept my eyes down. That's what they expect from someone like me. Quiet, invisible, replaceable. The wrought iron gates opened slowly, revealing a long driveway lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, leading up to a white mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But I didn't need to admire it. I already knew every inch of it. I had grown up there. Don't stare, I whispered to myself as I adjusted the strap of my bag and followed the house manager inside. To them, I was just the new nanny, 28 years old. No family listed, no references that mattered. Exactly the kind of person they wouldn't think twice about. Stay in your place and you'll be fine, the house manager said without even looking at me. I gave a small nod. I had no intention of staying in my place, because this house used to be mine. 10 years ago, I stood in that same hallway. Only back then, I was barefoot, crying, and holding onto a suitcase that was too small for everything I was losing. I remember the echo of my footsteps as I was told to leave. I remember the cold look in her eyes. My stepmother. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "This house doesn't belong to you anymore," she said calmly, like she was discussing the weather. I was 18, and just hours earlier, I had buried my father. "I have nowhere to go," I whispered. She tilted her head slightly, almost amused. "That's not my problem." Her son stood behind her, arms crossed, watching me like I was something unpleasant he wanted gone. I waited for someone to say something, for someone to stop this. But no one did. So I left. And as the door closed behind me, I made a promise to myself. I would come back. Not to beg, not to forgive, but to take everything back. If you like stories like this, stories about betrayal, revenge, and justice, make sure to hit like and subscribe, because what happened next no one saw coming. Kitchen is off limits unless you're preparing food for the child, the house manager continued, snapping me back to the present. You eat in the staff area. You don't use the main living spaces unless instructed. And you didn't speak unless spoken to. I nodded again. The rules didn't bother me. In fact, they helped. The less they noticed me, the easier this would be. "And one more thing," she added, finally turning to look at me. "The family values discretion." I almost smiled. So did I. The child I was hired to take care of was 6 years old. Polite, quiet, observant. He looked at me differently than the others did, like he was trying to figure something out. "What's your name?" he asked. I gave him a soft smile. "Claire." Not my real name, but the only one they would ever hear. He studied my face for a moment. "You don't talk like the others," he said. "Like who?" "The staff." I shrugged lightly. "Maybe I just like to think before I speak." He nodded, like that made sense. Kids notice things adults ignore. That was something I had learned the hard way. The first time I saw her again, I almost didn't recognize her. My stepmother. She had aged, but not in the way people usually do. There was something sharper about her now. Harder, like the years had carved away whatever softness she might have once had. She walked into the living room while I was helping the child with his homework. She didn't even look at me at first. "Is he done with his lessons?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said quietly. She glanced at me then, just a brief look, and then she looked away. No recognition. Nothing. Good. That meant everything was going exactly as planned. Her son, on the other hand, he was exactly how I remembered him. Confident, arrogant, careless. He walked through the house like he owned it, like everything around him was his by right, which, in his mind, it probably was. "You're new," he said one evening, leaning against the doorway as I cleaned up the child's toys. "Yes." He smirked slightly. "Try not to mess things up. We've had enough useless staff lately." I lowered my gaze. Of course. He didn't know who I was. He didn't remember the girl he had watched being thrown out of this house. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. Because I wasn't here for recognition. I was here for something else. Something much more important. The truth is, they thought they had taken everything from me. My home, my future, my place in this family. But what they didn't know was that my father had never intended for that to happen. And over the past 10 years, I had been quietly putting the pieces together, learning, waiting, preparing, because revenge isn't about anger. It's about timing. Every night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I would walk through the house,
Silently, carefully.
remembering the creak in the third step of the staircase, the hidden panel behind the bookshelf in the study, the safe my father thought no one knew about, except me. It took me 3 weeks to get into the study without raising suspicion. 3 weeks of observing routines, of understanding patterns, of becoming invisible. And when I finally stood in front of that bookshelf, my hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I pressed against the side panel, just like I used to. There was a soft click, and the wood shifted slightly. Still there, untouched, forgotten. Inside was the safe, and inside the safe was the truth. The safe was exactly where I remembered it, hidden behind the panel, untouched by time, by greed, by the people who thought they had already taken everything worth having. I knelt down slowly, running my fingers across the metal surface.
Cold. Solid.
Familiar. For a second, I closed my eyes. I could almost hear my father's voice again. "You never tell anyone about this," he had said, crouching beside me years ago. "Not even family. Especially not family." I was 12 when he showed me. 12 when I realized that trust in our house came with conditions. Back then, I thought it was just one of his eccentric habits. Now I knew better. I entered the code without hesitation. I had never forgotten it. Not once. Not even after 10 years. The lock clicked open. Inside, there were documents. Several folders. Old envelopes. A small velvet box. I reached for the top folder first. Property records. My eyes scanned the page quickly, then slowed, then stopped. A quiet breath escaped my lips. I had been right. The house was never fully transferred. They thought it was. They had papers, signatures, official-looking documents. But what they didn't know was that my father had split ownership in a way that was almost impossible to trace unless you knew exactly where to look. And they hadn't looked, because they never thought they had to. 50%. Still legally tied to me. I leaned back slightly, processing it. All these years they had been living here, renovating it, showing it off, spending money on it, thinking it was entirely theirs. And legally, it wasn't. Not even close. I flipped through the rest of the documents. There was more. Much more. Trust structures. Deferred ownership clauses. Contingency agreements that only activated under specific conditions. My father hadn't just protected the house. He had built a trap, and they had walked right into it. The velvet box caught my attention next. Inside was a key, not to a door, to something else. I already knew what. The business. The one my stepmother claimed had been left entirely to her. The one her son bragged about at every opportunity. The one that, according to them, had nothing to do with me. I smiled faintly. That wasn't true either. From that night on, everything changed. I stopped just observing and started acting. Carefully, quietly. The first step was simple. Verification. I needed everything confirmed through official channels. So I made a call. Not from the house. Never from the house. 2 days later, I sat across from a lawyer in a small, discreet office downtown. He adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the documents I had brought. "These are interesting," he said slowly. "Interesting how?" He looked up at me. "Legally binding." My chest tightened slightly, but my face remained calm. "And the house." He tapped the page. "Shared ownership. Still active. No transfer was ever completed on your portion." "And the business?" He paused, then gave a small, almost impressed nod. "You have leverage." Leverage. That was exactly what I needed. "Can they remove me?" I asked. "Not without your consent," he said. "And based on these clauses, they may not even realize the position they're in."
Good.
"Do they have any way of fixing this?" He leaned back slightly. "Not without involving you."
Perfect.
When I returned to the house that evening, nothing looked different.
The same lights.
The same polished floors. The same people who thought they were in control.
But now,
I knew the truth. And more importantly, so would they. I didn't rush. That would have been a mistake. Instead, I waited, watched, listened. It didn't take long to notice the shift. Subtle at first. Phone calls behind closed doors. Tension at dinner. Shorter tempers. Something was wrong. A week later, I found out what. They're selling the house. The words came from the house manager, spoken quietly to another staff member in the hallway. Apparently, they need liquidity. Debt, the other one whispered. A pause. Then a nod. I kept walking, like I hadn't heard anything. But inside, everything sharpened. Of course. That made sense. The business. The one they were so proud of. The one they thought was entirely theirs. It was failing. And now, they were trying to sell the one asset they believed could save them.
The house.
My house. I almost laughed. They had no idea. The following days were filled with activity. Agents coming in. Photos being taken. Conversations about listing prices and closing timelines. My stepmother looked tense. Her son looked irritated. Neither of them looked worried enough.
Not yet.
I waited until the listing was official. Until the offers started coming in. Until they were committed. And then, I made my move. The email was simple. Professional.
Direct.
Subject. Ownership clarification. Immediate attention required. I sent it to their lawyer. Attached every document. Every clause. Every detail they had overlooked. And then I waited. It didn't take long. The next morning, everything exploded. I knew something had happened the moment I walked into the house that morning. The energy was different. Tense. Sharp. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Voices echoed from the study. Raised voices. My stepmother's controlled, but strained. Her son's louder, angrier. And another voice.
Calm.
Measured. A lawyer. I moved quietly through the hallway, not stopping, not looking, just enough to hear. This isn't possible, her son snapped. I assure you it is, the lawyer replied. Papers shuffled. A chair scraped. You're telling me we don't own the house? He demanded. I'm telling you that you do not fully own the house.
Silence.
Heavy. Unbelieving. That's ridiculous, my stepmother said, her voice colder now. We have documents. And so does she.
She.
The word landed exactly the way I wanted it to. Who? Her son asked. A pause. Then, I don't have full details yet, but according to these records, a secondary owner has come forward. I continued walking.
Steady. Calm.
Invisible, but inside. I could feel it, that shift. That moment when control starts slipping. They didn't know it was me. Not yet. And that made it even better. The rest of the day, the house felt like it was on edge. Doors closing harder than usual. Conversations cutting off when staff walked in. Phones constantly ringing. By evening, the tension had turned into something else.
Fear.
Cancel the showing. Her son barked at someone over the phone. No, I don't care. Just cancel it. Too late. Once something like this starts, you don't just stop it. I stayed quiet.
Did my job.
Helped the child with homework. Prepared dinner. Cleaned up like I always did. Invisible. Until I chose not to be. That moment came 2 days later. They called a meeting. All staff were dismissed early. Except me. Stay, the house manager said, glancing at me briefly. They might need you. I almost smiled. Of course they would. I stood near the doorway of the living room, hands loosely folded, head slightly lowered. Just the nanny. Nothing more. My stepmother sat rigidly on the couch. Her son paced back and forth. The lawyer stood near the table, a folder in his hands.
She's coming, he said.
My stepmother's eyes narrowed. Who is she? Right on time. The front door opened. I stepped forward. And for the first time since I had entered that house, I lifted my head. You already know, I said calmly. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Confusion. Annoyance. Then recognition. Slow. Painful. Unavoidable. No, my stepmother whispered. Her son froze, staring, like he was trying to match the person in front of him with a memory he didn't want to accept. It's been a while, I said. Silence filled the room. He finally said, his voice tight. That's not possible. I took a step forward. No hesitation. No fear. It is, I replied. My stepmother stood up slowly. Her face had gone pale. You were hired as, she started. The nanny? I finished for her. A small, controlled smile touched my lips. Yes. Her eyes flicked to the lawyer, then back to me. You knew, she said. Of course I knew. Another step forward. You didn't. That landed exactly where it needed to. Her son let out a sharp laugh. This is ridiculous, he said. You think you can just walk in here and what? Claim ownership. I didn't answer him. Instead, I looked at the lawyer. Would you like to explain? I asked. He cleared his throat slightly. Professional. Detached. As I mentioned, he began. The property is legally co-owned. 50% remains under her name. Any sale, transfer, or financial decision involving the house requires her consent. Silence.
Thick.
Heavy. That's not, her son started. It is, the lawyer interrupted gently. My stepmother's composure cracked just slightly. What do you want? She asked. There it was. Not denial, not anger, reality. I met her gaze. Steady, unmoving. What I want, I said slowly, is what was always mine. Her jaw tightened. You have no right. I have every right. I cut in.
Calm. Precise.
And more than you think. The room went still again. Because this wasn't just about the house. Not anymore. The silence stretched longer this time. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Something heavier. Something closer to panic. My stepmother slowly sat back down. For the first time in my life, she looked uncertain. You said more than the house, she said carefully. I nodded. Her son scoffed. This is a joke, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Even if she owns half the house, that doesn't mean anything. We can buy her out. I almost smiled. No, I said quietly. That one word hit harder than anything else I could have said. His head snapped toward me. What do you mean no? I mean, I said, taking another step into the room, you don't get to decide how this goes. The lawyer shifted slightly, watching the exchange with interest now. You're in debt, I continued. That landed immediately. My stepmother's eyes narrowed. Her son froze. I don't know what you think, Your company is bleeding money, I said, cutting him off again. 3 failed investments in the past 18 months. 2 outstanding loans. One of them already in default. Silence. Real silence. How do you? He started. I told you, I said softly. I didn't just come back. I had studied them. Every move, every decision, every mistake. Because while they were busy living in comfort, I was learning how to take it away. My stepmother leaned forward slightly. You've been watching us. Yes. Why? That question almost made me laugh. Why? I repeated. I looked around the room, at the walls, the furniture, the life they had built on something that was never fully theirs. Because 10 years ago, I said, my voice steady, you stood in this house and told me I had nothing. Her expression tightened. And you were wrong. Another pause. What exactly are you planning? She asked. I exhaled slowly. This, I said, and then I placed a folder on the table. The same kind of folder her lawyer had been holding earlier. But this one was mine. He picked it up, opening it carefully. His expression changed as he read. Then he looked up at her. You need to see this, he said quietly. She took the folder. Her eyes moved quickly across the pages. Then slower. Then they stopped. No, she whispered. Her son stepped closer. What is it? She didn't answer. So the lawyer did. The business, he said. A significant portion of its debt has been acquired. A pause. By her. The room tilted. At least, that's how it felt for them. That's not possible, her son said again, but this time his voice wasn't confident. It is, I said, because over the past year, quietly, patiently, I had been buying it, piece by piece, through third parties, through channels they never thought to check. Debt is power, and now, I had it. You planned this, my stepmother said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. How long? I met her eyes. Since the day you told me to leave. That was the moment it broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Her shoulders dropped slightly, her certainty gone. Her son looked between us, trying to find something, anything, that would give him control again. What do you want? He asked. There it was. Again, the only question that mattered. I walked closer to the table, close enough now that there was no distance left between us. I'm not here to destroy you, I said. That surprised them. I could see it. I'm here to make things right. My stepmother let out a quiet, bitter breath. By taking everything? I tilted my head slightly. No, I said. By taking back what was mine. Another pause. And giving you a choice. They weren't expecting that. You can fight this, I continued. Drag it through courts. Spend money you don't have. Lose time you can't afford. I let that sink in. Or, I placed another document on the table. We settle. Her son grabbed it first. His eyes scanned the page. His expression shifted. What is this? He asked. A way out, I said. My stepmother stood slowly, walking closer, reading over his shoulder. This, she started, keeps you from losing everything, I finished. The terms were simple. They would transfer full ownership of the house to me, immediately. No disputes, no delays. In return, I would restructure the business debt.
Give them time.
A chance to recover, not out of kindness, but because I didn't need to destroy them to win. I had already won. The room was silent again, but this time it was different. Final. My stepmother closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. You planned every step, she said. Yes. And you still came back here as a nanny? I smiled slightly. You never notice the people you think are beneath you. That hit harder than anything else. Her son looked at me differently now. Not with arrogance. Not with dismissal. With understanding. Too late. My stepmother picked up the pen. Her hand hesitated for just a second. Then she signed. And just like that, it was over. The house was mine again. A few days later, I stood alone in the living room. No staff. No noise. No tension. Just silence. The kind that feels earned. I walked slowly through the house, touching the walls, the furniture, the memories. Not all of them were good, but they were mine. And now, so was everything else. Funny, isn't it? They thought I was just the nanny, but the truth is, I was the only one who ever truly belonged there. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. And tell me, what would you have done in my place?